Yeah, I'll give you. Okay. All right. All right, we're good. So whenever you want, just, go ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shoot Your Shot podcast, where we talk all things college basketball. We're now in late February for our fourth episode, so we have a jam-packed agenda. I'm here joined with Aldo again. Aldo, how are things going?
How's it going, John? We're getting in the crunch time here.
We sure are. All of these games are becoming super important as the final few down the stretch here. So before we get into all that, just want to give a reminder that we release our podcast on our Twitter handle at Shoot Your Shot PC. So go ahead and give that a follow to hear the latest content and see some of our tweets. So we want to get into a whole bunch of things, but last episode we teased the all-name team where I rattled off 25 of the best names in college basketball, and the results are in. We had hundreds and thousands and dozens and a few votes, but I can now unveil the all-name team, first team and second team all-name team. So it was an absolute landslide at the top. The captain of the all-name team, and Hart Leslie, the senior from Cal State Fullerton, which is awesome. So congratulations to Lionheart. But that being said, he is a senior, so next year that top spot is open. We'll run through the second team here. So it's number 10, Taco Fall, the sophomore from UCF. Number 9, Pookie Powell, the sophomore from LaSalle. Number 8, Jamoni McNeese, the sophomore from Oklahoma. Number 7, Stone Gettings, the sophomore from Cornell, and the captain of the second all-name team is Quindary Weatherspoon.
A
So
lot of
there you have it.
sophomores there. I'm glad
Sophomores.
to see. Yeah, we might not have many open spots next year unless we get
You
some
know,
great names.
you know what? I'm thinking the same thing. There's a lot of young talent on these teams. There are a couple seniors that didn't make the cut, which is a real shame. But yeah, an entirely sophomore second team, so there might not be too much turnover next year.
All right,
Go.
let us hear the first team.
Okay, so the first team, Aldo, I know this is going to hurt you, but barely sneaking onto the first team with the fifth spot, Sunjay Lumpkin, the senior from Northwestern.
That's a little low for me. I thought he would have been captain, but honestly, I kind of forgot / just learned about Lionheart Leslie, so I'm okay with Lionheart being the captain of the squad.
Yeah, yes. So after that, the fourth spot, Sir Washington from Eastern Washington, a junior. Third was Giddy Potts, a junior from MTSU. Number 2
I
was
was getting
Admiral.
worried there. I didn't hear Giddy's name. I was getting actually really worried.
Yeah, Giddy actually got way more votes than we anticipated. So he came in number 3. Number 2 was Admiral Schofield, the sophomore from Tennessee. And like I said, number 1, Lionheart Leslie, the senior out of Cal State Fullerton. He was either first or second on every single ballot. So it's an absolute landslide. So there you have it. That is your first and second all-name team. Apologies to a couple good ones, specifically Mo Alley-Cox and Darius Thornwell and Jalen Hornbeek, who just barely missed the cut. But I know that we could have had a late addition that you discovered this week.
Yeah, so last night I was watching the East Tennessee State Furman game, big Southern Conference game, by the way. Went into overtime, real good game. And this is what's great about college basketball. This guy's at the line, and I'm like, what the hell is this name on the screen taking up half the screen? It was Davontavious Payne. Davontavious, probably the best for like, his combination of names not as great maybe, but Davontavious, one of the best first names I've seen.
That is killer. I'm gonna go with he was on probation this year, so he actually wasn't postseason eligible. That's why he didn't get on there. But
All right.
if he's an underclassman, I am almost guaranteeing that he'll end up on the name teams next year. But that is a phenomenal name. So even myself and Aldo overlook some of these guys, but I feel like our current standing is a pretty good bet for the best names in college basketball.
Yeah, they're all solid. Like I said, thought Sanjay Lumpkin had it locked in for the captaincy, but that's okay. Get new great names every year.
Exactly right. Got a really strong class of freshmen, like always. So we'll try to do that, and yeah, like you said, a lot of sophomores on here, so we'll see a lot of repetition. But getting back to some on the court discussions. Late February now, so the bubble talk is hot and heavy. And I think in one conference where the bubble is striking is in the Missouri Valley. So, although I know you wanted to take a stab at kind of what's going on there.
Yeah, so Wichita State, if everyone doesn't know, has one of the more interesting resumes um, in the country this year. They are 26-4 overall, which is outstanding. They have not a great strength of schedule. It's 139th in KenPom and 212th in RPI. Now, I'm a huge KenPom guy. I'm not big on the RPI, but the committee still clearly uses it. So we have to kind of consider it when we're looking at resumes. Um, and I don't think you should solely use KenPom to put a team into the field either, but I think it's a little more useful when you're looking at maybe top 50 or top 100 wins rather than the RPI. But so Wichita State is 12th in KenPom, which is insanely high for a team that is considered to be on the bubble.
Yeah, so at 12 they're ahead of Duke, Oregon, Wisconsin, SMU, UCLA. I mean, 12 is crazy high for a
Yeah,
mid-major team like that.
yeah, that it's wild. And the fact that they're on the bubble. The two main bracketologists, if you will, you have, Joey Brackets from ESPN. He has them right now in like an 8-9 game, so kind of safely in, but if they would lose, maybe drop them to like close to a play-in game. And Jerry Palm from CBS has them as like the next four team or the first four teams out, so not even in the field right now. Now, this whole thing can be easily avoided if they win the Missouri Valley, and they've kind of been rolling through. They have one loss on the year to the other good team in the Valley, which is Illinois State. But like I was saying before, the resume is so interesting. They don't have a great strength of schedule, like I said. They have no top 50 wins if you're looking at KenPom. They have 550 to 100 wins in KenPom, and those five are like at the tail end. Like I don't like giving certain brackets like that either, like 50 to 100, because a team could have 550 to 100 wins, and they could all be 50 to 60, and one team can beat the 90th team like two or three. You know what I mean? So
Right, right.
it's brackets like that make it tough too. But pretty much they have 550 to 100 wins with all of those other than Illinois State like on the tail end there. So their second best win is Oklahoma. I just don't know if that's good enough. And I know it's a lot of wins, and I know it's Wichita State, and I know that they're one of the best 68 teams in the country. I just don't know what the committee is going to do. And I honestly don't even know what they should do. I'm, pro mid-major, as everybody can probably tell. So I will always like to see a team like Wichita in over some shit Big Ten Michigan team. Um, but just based on like their consistency over the last couple of years, I really have no idea what they're going to do come Selection Sunday. People have been writing about it a lot this week. People have said that like, if you don't put them in, they're stupid. But I found something interesting that last year St. Mary's has almost the identical resume that Wichita has right now. It's just weirdly similar, and they didn't get in. And I remember all year people were saying, "Oh, everybody knows St. Mary's is one of the best teams in the country. They just haven't really beaten anybody." Well, they didn't get in. So I don't really know what the committee's going to do. St. Mary's last year, like I said, Wichita's strength of schedule on KenPom is like 139. Going into the tournament, St. Mary's was 136. Like I said, Wichita State has a win against Illinois State, Oklahoma, Colorado State. St. Mary's wins were probably better. They beat Gonzaga twice. Now, Gonzaga wasn't the Gonzaga of this year, but they were maybe 30-ish if in KenPom. They beat them twice, home and away. They beat BYU and two like around 100-ish teams in UC Irvine and Stanford. So very similar resume. They had just as many losses. Now, two of them were bad losses, where Wichita doesn't really have any bad losses. They lost to Pepperdine twice. But all I'm trying to say here is that certain people think that, just because Wichita we know is one of the best 68 teams, that they're going to put them in. I don't really know. I don't know whether they're going to be put in. I don't know whether they should be. It's just such an interesting case. And I just don't think that they're a lock like some people think. And I don't think, that they necessarily shouldn't get in. It's just a very interesting case. And I don't know how you feel about the subject. I've gone back and forth whether they should actually get in or not, but it's just a real interesting resume.
Yeah, so this is really kind of the crux of the selection committee here, and I'll kind of lay my cards out on the table. I have been lower on the entire Wichita State program than a lot of other people. It's tough to be low on a program that's been to a Final Four and gotten a 1 seed, but I think that they get the benefit of the doubt a lot, and kind of what you said, we're talking about the Missouri Valley, like everyone focuses on Wichita. When if you look at Illinois State's resume, it's comparable. I mean, they're both 16-1
Right.
in conference. Wichita has better losses and a better win, but I mean, Illinois State is comparable schedules. So it's kind of it's a difficult case for both teams here, because you'd hope that they both meet up in the conference championship, and of course the winner would advance. Then the question becomes, is the Missouri Valley a 2-bid league? And that's where things really get interesting, in my opinion, because you have these two teams which obviously are good. They've ran through their conference. Their best win are one another. So they
Right.
really didn't
Right.
get anything done in the non-conference. And it boils down to, okay, you have a 16-1 team that lost in the conference tournament. Do they get in from a mid-major standpoint? And the answer in literally every other mid-major below the Missouri Valley is no.
Right. And that's
So,
what
I
I
mean,
don't
and
think.
that's what it's been historically. So, not like I'm going to have a problem if Wichita State loses to Illinois State in the conference championship and gets in, but I think that'll be the second year in a row that they've gotten the benefit of the doubt just by name itself and by computers. Because although they're 12th in KenPom, if you look at their resume, it looks like every other mid-major school that tears through their conference and challenges themselves in the non-conference and loses to Louisville and Michigan State. So it's we're talking about them because they are Wichita, but they're no different than the other teams that run through their mid-major conferences, in my opinion, at the surface.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you on that. Like I said, I would like to see them get in because honestly, I'd rather see Wichita State get in, like I said, over like a Michigan or, I'm like
Oh, for sure. I think
a middle of the pack, some big conference team. But yeah, but I don't think that they look. You're definitely right. They don't look at them in the same light as even a Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee State has the same amount of losses.
mm-hmm.
They're a little lower, and the computers are like 40, which is still solid. And they have actually probably better wins. They might have a
Right.
couple worse losses, but they're not even in the conversation compared to Wichita. So that's what you. I don't know. Yeah, you gotta. The committee has to make up their mind. If they're actually going to consider teams that run through their conference or not.
Right. I think,
I'm fine either way, but you can't be putting Wichita in every year just because they're kind of not a mid-major when they have pretty much the same resume as a team like, for instance, Middle Tennessee State. Now, the one thing that I'm really interested about, say they lose in the semi to Northern Iowa, not Illinois State, and they
mm-hmm.
don't get in. I wonder if they're going to be higher in KenPom than they were last year, and they were really high last year, which is the reason they got into the tournament. If they don't put them in this year and their resume is pretty much the same, they actually have a few less amount of losses.
Right.
They pretty much would be saying that they put the team in last year because they had Baker and Van Vliet, and everybody knows who they are. In my opinion, because no one really knows this Wichita team. You and I know, they're really deep They have McDuffie, Shaman. I mean, they're a really good team. I don't want to get matched up with them, but nationally, I would say they're not as well known. Like everybody knew who Baker and Van Vliet were. They were probably the best known like backcourt in the country. And so if they don't get put in this year, your numbers are even higher than last year. I just think it is an even worse look for the NCAA. So I think that they're going to put them in, but it's just a really interesting case.
Yeah. So one thing I want to mention here is I watched last year's selection show, and I was upset not because no mid majors got in from the bubble, but because one got in, and that was Wichita. I
Exactly.
feel like the committee needs to kind of put their draw their line in the sand, which is, hey, if you are a good mid major that goes 16-1, goes 15-2, and loses in your conference championship, you are either in or you're out. And that's where the line was pretty wavy last year, because if you recall who got in, Syracuse, Tulsa, Vandy got in last year, and then Wichita, because they're Wichita. So, if the decision is made to get some of these smaller conferences for those bid stealers that beat the conference favorite, I'm on board with that. But it has to be universal. We can't just continue to cherry pick based on names and storylines. And I understand there's kind of a backing of CBS and ratings and all that stuff, which is going to draw better for a playing game at Dayton. If Wichita's involved, obviously. But I think from the committee's perspective, that there just needs to be some consistency. And I think over the past 2 or 3 years with Wichita, there hasn't been. So I think if they lose to Illinois State, I guess the bottom line is if they lose to Illinois State and you start comparing resumes, you got a team whose best non-con win is Oklahoma. I mean, that shouldn't get in, and we'll just see where it lies. So the Missouri Valley is kind of the poster child for these competitive mid-major conferences that are flirting with a two-bid league, but really haven't made it convert. So this year is actually a pretty interesting case if Illinois State is able to cut down the nets. In Arch Madness.
Yeah. One final thought on this. You pretty much said it. So if they put Wichita in, I don't have a problem. But say Middle Tennessee State also loses in their championship game, or UT Arlington loses in their championship game, I want them in too. If you're going to put Wichita in,
right.
If all three of those lose in their championship game and none of them get in, that's fine too. I prefer them in, but you got to do one or the other, because there's no reason to just put Wichita in when they have, like you said, they have pretty much the same resume as any other top tier mid major that has ran through their conference and lost to pretty much all the good teams that they've played in the non-con.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really it. And if one of those two teams, if Wichita doesn't get in, that opens up the bubble for a lot of these, frankly, mediocre, less than mediocre, big Power 5 schools. And the poster child for that right now is Clemson, who lost earlier this week. They're 4-11 in ACC play, and which we're actually recording this podcast on Thursday night. So as of tonight, they're in Joe Lunardi's last 4 in at 4-11 in ACC play, which is a little mind-boggling. Kind of the bubble, the weakness of the bubble and the strength of the ACC now.
Yeah, I don't know your opinion on this. I know it's a big topic. Some people think that you should have to go 500 in conference. Others, say, it is a whole body of work, so it doesn't matter where, if you lose a lot of conference games, if you did the work. I just don't get Clemson's case at all. First of all, I am kind of a fan of the 500 in conference rule. But I understand there's years where, like the ACC or the old Big East, where an 8-10 team, or even like 7-11, it may be 7-11, but like an 8-10 team, they're probably deserving. It's a tough conference, and would a lot of these other schools even get 8 wins in the conference? No, but they're 4-11. It's unbelievable. If they win their last 3, which they're only favored in like 2 of them, they would be 7-11. They're probably going to end up 6-12. Are you really going to put a team that is in the bottom quarter of a league? And the crazy thing to me is they played an extremely tough schedule. I think it's one of the top in the country,
Hmm.
but their out of conference wins and even their in conference wins are nothing special. It's not like their 4 or 5 conference wins are against Louisville, Carolina, Duke, you know, something along those lines. Their conference wins, you might have them written down. I want to say it's like Wake twice, Pitt and BC, or something,
Right. Wake twice, Pitt and Georgia Tech, and
in Georgia Tech.
those last two games you're saying they're favored in are NC State at home and Boston College at home. So,
Yeah.
uh,
So
yeah,
they play. I think it's Florida State next,
right,
right?
right.
Yeah. So say they lose to Florida State, which they probably will, and then beat Boston College and NC State. They'll be 6-12 in don't get me wrong, a great conference. But those 6 wins are against the bottom like third of the ACC. So like if you even want to make an argument that a 6-12 team, which is in my opinion ridiculous anyway, they got to be like a big 6 wins, and they're not. So I don't even get I don't get the argument whatsoever for them. If they get in the field at 6-12, even 7-11 with their wins that they have,
Hmm.
I just don't get it. And then like I said, their non-conference, like they did well and they played a very tough schedule. I think they might have went like 10-2, something along those lines. But
Hmm.
their best wins were like Georgia and UNCW. Like good wins, but nothing that puts a team that's 6-12 in conference into like a next level where you're like, oh, well, they beat so many great teams out of conference that it shouldn't matter. So I don't know how you feel about that, but 6-12 just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. So Clemson is interesting for me. I mean, the conference schedule, right? 4-11 is not going to cut it. And to your point, right? Wake, Pitt, and Georgia Tech. They, I mean, not saying like any team, but hey, any team is going to be able to feast off the bottom dwellers of their conference. So getting those wins, you shouldn't be rewarded for even getting those 4 ACC wins. Like in order to be rewarded in conference play, you need to take down the big dogs. And unlike some of the other small schools we were talking about earlier, every week, Clemson has a chance to take down a top 25 school, and they never once converted on it. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the opportunity that when you're in the ACC, you have countless opportunities. We're not asking you to win them all. We're not even asking you to win half, but like nip Louisville and Notre Dame on your home court,
Right.
and like we're
Just
not
win
having this
one. Just
discussion.
win one or
You're
two.
right. You're 6-9. You have a good non-con, and you got some top 25 wins. So I think that's where the rub is for Clemson. I will say what they have going for them is they did play a challenging non-conference schedule. They don't have any great wins, but they have wins over their bubble opponents. And if it boils down to head-to-head, them versus Georgia, them versus, I mean, Davidson's kind of a stretch, but them versus like Wake or them versus South Carolina, who's slipping now. I mean, they have wins over those schools, which is good to have in your back pocket. So it's the question of, is the work that they did in the non-conference enough to kind of overrule their efforts, their poor efforts in the ACC? And I would think no, but a lot of the so-called experts are giving them a chance. So it'll be kind of another interesting precedent that the committee makes here if they let a 6-12 team in conference play into the tournament. So I think that's kind of a something to wait and see on with Clemson. And you mentioned in your bit there that mentioning this idea of kind of having a 500 threshold in conference play. It sounded like you were in favor of that.
A little bit. I think it's tough because there are certain conferences every year that are just so strong that I think, like I said, like if you have 18 conference games and you go 8-10 in this year's ACC, and like I said, maybe even 3 or 4 of those wins are against top teams like that. I don't know if you should be eliminated from the tournament for going like one game, under 500 in one of the toughest leagues in America. I just don't want to see a 6-12 team in that. Like that's ridiculous to me. So I'm kind of torn on it, but
Sure. So I am so against something like that when it comes to the tournament selection for a handful of reasons, and let me get to them here. So, one, we know that strength of schedule comes to play. We know that RPI comes into play when you're getting a selection, but none of these rules are like hard, fast rules where you have a cut line. Getting a record cut line to be able to be eligible for the postseason is just a really, really slippery slope. Like if you just draw a line in the sand that, hey, if you didn't go 500 or better in your league, you're out, is really dangerous for a couple of reasons. Like, although Clemson obviously won't reach that 500 mark, but when their season ends on Selection Sunday, they'll be sitting in their locker room with the idea that, hey, maybe my name will be called. Like maybe we'll get in based on what we've done, to kind of eliminate that whole idea of hope, if you will, to be like, no matter what we did, if we went 7-9, we can't get in. I think that's just super, super dangerous to have a hard and fast, as we don't have any others in place right now. So I think that gets a little dicey. And you mentioned the strong conferences. Yeah, there are some conferences that are really strong and good teams aren't going to go 500. And I think that's something that people understand. But what I immediately thought too was like, if you have a team that suffered an injury, so I want to take you to one of our favorite teams this year. So Creighton, I don't think anyone's debating that Creighton shouldn't get in the tournament, but they started out 18-1 with awesome wins over Butler, Xavier, Seton Hall, Wisconsin. Like they were trending on the 1 or 2 line, and they're now 9-6 with 3 games to go against Villanova, St. John's, and Marquette. Like if they lose those 3 games, they're 9-9, and now we have a rule where they have to go 500. So this team has an awesome start. That happens. Someone gets kicked off the team. Someone gets an injury, and now you kind of tail off at the end of the season. To have them eliminated based on kind of an arbitrary 500 cut line is just really, really dangerous. So I think it's a good factor to be discussed in the committee room. But as soon as we start drawing these hard and fast lines as to teams that are in and out, I think it gets really, really dicey, and coaches and conferences are going to start to schedule in ways, just like you game the RPI, just you can try to game some of your conference schedule. So I think it's a slippery slope to start making these definitive rules like that.
Yeah, I personally I just don't want to see it, like I said, a 6-12 team get in when and it comes back to even the mid majors. Like I think it's extremely impressive for even these small conferences. If you go undefeated and they get no love, I would just rather see a team that goes undefeated. I know we loved that Murray State team 2 years ago with Campaign. They went 18-0. They won like 24 straight games and they lost by 1 in the semi to Belmont.
Yep.
So like I would rather just see a team like that get in than a 6-12 team. So that's the only reason I'm like a little bit for it. But as you were talking, I actually thought of a reason that it probably wouldn't be good. It is also because these huge conferences now play unbalanced
Right.
schedules, and that's completely unfair too. Now you have the Big East and the Big 12. Probably my 2 favorite. I just like how they play the true round robin. And that would be, if everybody played a true round robin, I think it would be closer to being a good idea. But the fact that they play in the, SEC, ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12, no, I think Pac-12 might play a true round robin, but those bigger conferences don't even play. You could get lucky and only play the top couple teams once, and that's just not fair too if you're comparing like actual, like you said, like hard numbers.
Right. I agree, and that's kind of what I was getting at with some of the conferences gaming the system like they do for the RPI. You could backload or really get your horses' schedules in a more favorable that way. So I think it brings up an interesting discussion point on how we should be viewing conference record, both for the little guys and for the big guys. Is a 16-1 mid major better than a 6-12 Power 5? So I think it's healthy discussion. And potentially we get some more indication on how the committee views those records in the coming few weeks. So being, like I said, at the end of February, there's going to be a lot of bubble talk, and we'll continue to hit on those. But earlier this week, we had some really, really awesome games. 2 last night that went down to the wire were Oregon at Cal and Duke at 'Cuse. I think we can talk about these real quickly. So we'll start with Oregon and Cal. Aldo, you brought this to my attention, but if you're focused on kind of betting trends, there was A lot of smoke about Cal giving Oregon a really, really good game, potentially even winning, and it looked like Cal was going to get that victory the entire game. They were up maybe 15 points or so at halftime. Oregon stormed back on the road, and it resulted in Dylan Brooks doing exactly what he does, which is just taking over a game and hitting a huge, huge three to get Oregon out of Berkeley with a 3-point win and still in contention for the Pac-12 title. So just a really impressive performance for Oregon, a team that obviously didn't have it going in the first half to be able to come back and win at a pretty tough place, a pretty good team against Cal. So really, really big for all those West Coast schools, as there's I count 4 of them who had the ability to go to the Final Four.
Yeah, the West Coast is I wouldn't even say underrated this year. I think they're all starting to get some love, but Oregon is a complete team, and if you have a kid like Brooks that, you need a bucket, you're not playing well, one game in the tournament, he can get it for you. So yeah, I really love Oregon, and you mentioned the thing with the line. It was really interesting. Yeah, somebody knew something because 90% of the bets were coming in on Oregon, yet the line kept moving against them. So it was like a reverse line. So 90% of the amount of wagers were coming in on Oregon, but the heavy money was coming in on Cal. It was pretty wild. But
Yeah,
yeah, like you said, Dylan Brooks is just stone cold, and come 20 time, not many other people I would want taking a last shot if I need it than him.
yeah, he is a bad man, and when that team gets their dynamic, accounted for, where you're running the offense through Brooks, they're dangerous. They're a really good team. So 3 teams out in the Pac-12, including Gonzaga, definitely in title contention. So just moments, just on the same plane, during the same night, we had another crazy, crazy buzzer beater. That was Duke at Syracuse, and Syracuse was hosting Duke in the Carrier Dome. Cuse has been coming on really well. They looked like a lost team at the beginning of the year, but they now have an above 500 record in the ACC since that. It's an important stat now, and got a really, really big home win against Duke on a buzzer beater bank in 3 to beat Duke. Grayson Allen had a rough night. I think he went 1 for 11 or 2 for 11, and Cuse was able to pull this one out. So a really big win, and what that did, because at the same time North Carolina defeated Louisville at home, and that gave North Carolina a 2-game lead in the ACC. So they're well on their way to yet another conference championship and the number 1 overall seed. So a lot of questions got answered there in the ACC.
Yeah, I think Carolina will probably end up getting that last 1 seed, like you said. I actually think they're one of the best teams in the country. But for Syracuse, they're one of the streakiest teams in the country. Our good buddy and college roommate Nick was asking me you know, if I thought they were going to make the tourney and how good they were, and I was like, they had a lot of bad losses early. They've had a lot of great wins of late. They still can't, because of all those losses they have, and that the fact that they're bad losses, they can't really just tank here at the end, but they should get in. And I don't know if I want to play them. Their defense isn't as good as usual. It's not that zone that you're scared to match up with. They kind of just give up points, to be honest. But man, are they streaky. I could easily see them making another run to the Final Four. I don't know if I necessarily will put them to do that, but I would, come first weekend in April, if they're there, wouldn't be too shocked. They're just so streaky with Leiden and Gillen now just going off, and Andrew White. They're just an extremely streaky and good offensive team when they get hot, and they can score with anybody. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But like you said, I think Carolina locked down the ACC title pretty much. They still have a couple tough games left. I believe they get Louisville one more time or Virginia one more time. So we'll see what happens there. But they most likely, assuming that they hold on to this lead in the ACC, they'll lock in that last 1 seed along with Gonzaga, Villanova, and probably Kansas.
Right, and what a wonderful lead into another game we wanted to talk to from last night, which was Butler defeating Notre Dame at the Pavilion. So that's a season sweep.
Villanova,
Oh, sorry.
John. Jeez.
Who did I say?
Notre Dame.
Oh, sorry. Well, they had that great
We don't have
game.
we don't have time. We don't have time to talk Notre Dame on this
Well,
podcast.
hey, the Never Forget Classic. Okay, we can never forget the Notre Dame Nova game at the Proust earlier this year. Okay, got to keep that in mind. Never forget. um, so yes, thank you for correcting me. Butler at Nova. So Butler had the season sweep of Villanova this year. They got a big win against the number 2 team in the country on the road, which is about as good of a win as you're going to get all season, particularly down the stretch when you're jockeying for seeding. So a really, really impressive performance by Butler. They're one of those teams that can beat anyone just because of the style of play. They're actually very deep this year. They have a couple of transfers that have started to make a name for themselves in Butler uniforms, and really what's anchoring a Big East that's really tailed off with Xavier and Creighton losing a little steam with some injuries. So that was a really big win for Butler. And an interesting stat came out of that game. The current Villanova seniors were 46-0 at the Pavilion, which is their home court. So that was their first home court loss in their entire career, which is an amazing feat for a 4-year stretch to go through like that. I will say that Villanova does play a few home games at the Wells Fargo Center, so you got to just temper that a little bit with some of their big games, particularly this year, Virginia, even though they won that game at the Wells Fargo Center. But still, a really, really impressive streak came to an end last night as Butler got a huge win and is now flirting with a better seed than the committee unveiled for them, which was fourth seed already.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be nice about it, John. They schedule pretty much all their big games at the Wells Fargo Center. So, I mean, I've seen better stats, but all joking aside, they're really good.
I
But
think, did Chris Dunn get them at the Wells Fargo Center last year?
probably, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they have a game on Saturday and it's a big one, and they're like, oh no, we're moving it to the Wells Fargo Center. But but yeah, no, Butler, I think in Lenardi's latest bracket, Butler's actually now a 3 seed, so that's really interesting. And like you said, it's good for the Big East because Butler was kind of even tailing off, and it all happened at once. No, Nova's been steady all year, but then Mo Watson got hurt for Creighton, Sumner got hurt for Xavier, Butler was kind of tailing off, so the Big East kind of was taking a big hit, and it didn't have a great look for a little while there. So it's good that Butler's kind of back, and they should have 2 top teams coming, come tourney time. But yeah, big win for Butler. I'm kind of shocked that they beat Nova twice. Not even that it was at home. That I thought that after that loss that Jay Wright would have had them fired up and ready to go. But yeah, both those teams are interesting matchups come March, and probably teams you don't really want to see until later in the tournament.
Definitely, definitely. And one final game I wanted to talk about from earlier this week, an under the radar game, which was UConn at Houston. This is a Houston team that I really enjoy watching. Man, can they score! But the reason this was an important one is UConn started off had a horrible start to the season, horrible start, and everyone had written them off. But they've actually put a nice stretch together in conference play, and Cincinnati obviously leads that conference with SMU in second, and both of those are locks and going to be seated very nicely in the tourney. But Houston and Connecticut are actually third and fourth. So this was a big game. They were both battling for that third place team in the American Conference, who would avoid the number 1 overall seed, likely Cincinnati, which would be big. So if the American is going to get 3 teams in, you can look likely to that game last night, which Houston won at home, I think by 5 points. Shout out to Connecticut for hitting that 3 to allow them to cover at the end. But Houston path now on their way to the number 3 seed in the American tournament, and hopefully can get a bid and get some of these high mid-major conferences like the A10 and the American a few more bids than was previously thought a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, who knows with Houston? UConn will need to win the tournament to have any chance to get in. Houston has a small chance, but who knows? The committee seems to love American crappy teams. They put Tulsa in last year, just out of nowhere, not on anybody's radar. They throw Tulsa in. I was like, all right, I guess little American love, but maybe they'll do the same thing with Houston. But yeah, personally, I think both of them would need to. Well, either of them need to win the American tournament to get in, which will be interesting with SMU and Cincinnati both kind of being the favorites. You need probably one of them hopefully to get knocked off early and then, play one in the final maybe and see because I don't know if they can run through both of them.
So
But yeah, it'll be interesting for the
I
American.
gotta ask. So of Houston and UConn, knowing that the tournament is in Connecticut, which one of those teams is more likely to win the American Conference?
Probably UConn. I actually forgot that the tournament was in UConn. And that is the only reason I'm saying UConn. I actually am not a huge Houston believer this year, but we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see what happens. I honestly think Cincy or SMU, one of those two, is kind of just going to roll through the tournament.
I would agree, but I would think that Houston has a better shot just because of their offense. But we'll see if the American can sneak a third bid in there.
All right. This week on the Mid-Major Minute, John is going to give us a quick update on his favorite conference, the Mountain West, and I will roll through 8 conferences that by the time we talk to you guys next week on March 3rd would have already started possibly the best week in sports, championship week. So 8 conferences start between February 27th and by the time next Friday when we talk to you on March 3rd, 8 conferences would have already started. It's the best time of year, so we'll run through those real quick, kind of give you just the favorites, who to look out for. But before I do that, John, I know you're a huge Mountain West guy. Got to stay up for those 11 o'clock CBS sports tips.
Exactly right, which I often do. I think I can say that I have now watched every Mountain West team this year, and throughout every single one of those games, at one point in the game, the announcer goes, "Well, you know what? When this tournament in Vegas starts, it's anyone's tournament." Literally saying that teams that are slightly separating themselves. This Mountain West year has been kind of a difficult one to watch for a fan. There's really no way that this is a 2-bid league. It's going to come down to who wins this conference tournament. And if you're a glass half full guy, you can think 6 or 7 teams can go into Vegas and win. But right now there are 2 teams tied at the top. Nevada and Colorado State are 11-4. Nevada was expected to be good and compete for a title. Colorado State, what they're doing is pretty amazing. But neither team has any sort of resume to write home about. Nevada got smacked by St. Mary's in the season opener, and their best non-conference win is Iona. Colorado State scheduled pretty well. They lost to Stanford, Wichita, and Kansas State, and their best non-conference win is Colorado. So even the teams at the top really don't have any sort of argument to get an at-large bid. So just a little about this Nevada team, which is super exciting. They have 3 players, Cam Oliver, Marcus Marshall, and Jordan Corline, who are kind of a 3-headed monster. They're super exciting to watch. Cam Oliver is just this built sophomore who can shoot from
I think he's
deep.
getting NBA looks too.
Yeah, he is getting NBA looks. He can do it all. He can shoot and he can just yam on people. So as a Mountain West fan, I hope that he doesn't go because Nevada has a good group of transfers coming in, but he's getting a lot of NBA looks. And Marcus Marshall is just a really, really high scoring guard. So I think they're the most dangerous team in the Mountain West if they're able to get in. So
who's your pick? Who's your pick? I know the Mountain West tourney's a little later, but right now, who are you going with in Vegas?
Who's my pick? So after all this talk about Nevada, I would give. If I'm going to pick, I'm going to go a little off the radar. I think New Mexico. I've actually been really impressed with what I've seen with New Mexico. They had that historic meltdown at home against Nevada. I think they blew like a 25-point lead. So they can obviously play with Nevada. I guess I'll go with New Mexico to win it, but it's, in my opinion, is going to be Nevada or New Mexico. And then I just want to chime in a real quick here on my all-time favorite Mountain West team, San Diego State. Or I take that back. UNLV is probably my favorite, but San Diego State has just had a horrible year. Very un-Steve Fisher-like. They've just been blowing leads left and right to these poor schools. So the favorite going into the Mountain West has had a horrible year, and really – just on name alone, they could compete. But from what I've seen, this is going to be Nevada or New Mexico's conference.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That I'm used to that conference with at least one or two teams locked in and kind of like, oh, maybe this third or fourth team can steal a bid. It's definitely, usually one of those top talked about leagues for bid thieves, but it doesn't look like that's happening at all this year. And probably won't happen at any of these other conferences that I'm about to bring up, but some of these tournaments are just honestly, even some of them are even better than March Madness. It's so intense. Everybody's got to win to get in. And like I've said before, you have some of these top teams that'll lose in the semis and the finals, and it's just kind of heartbreaking because they would have won like 18 of their last 20 games, and now they're not going dancing. So I'll get started here. So the first conference, which is starting this week, is the American East. Vermont is still undefeated in conference. They have one big game left against Stony Brook, so they're the favorite there. Then we have the Atlantic Sun, Florida Gulf Coast. Everybody knows them for their run to the Sweet 16 a couple years
Dunk
ago.
City.
Yes, sir. Dunk City. They have kind of been taking care of business. I think they have a couple conference losses, but they're the favorite there. We have the Big South, which has like a three-way. I don't know if it's a tie or they all only have a couple losses at the top. It's UNC Asheville, Winthrop, and Liberty. The two favorites there are probably UNC Asheville and Winthrop. I've actually seen them play each other twice, and they're both really entertaining games. So hopefully they match up in the final. The next one is the Double A MAC, probably one of our more favorite real low conferences. And Monmouth, the team that got snubbed last year, kind of took care of business again. Not clearly as good out of conference as last year, so they're not going to get in that large bid, but they hopefully can take care of business. I know you have a school to watch out for there.
Yeah. The MAC has been interesting for the longest time. None of these teams wanted to separate themselves. Monmouth has, but I would look out for the St. Peter's Peacocks. We love Cox on this podcast, and I'd be afraid the Cox will split with Monmouth this year, so that'll be an interesting tournament.
Yeah, and you always have to watch out for Iona and even Siena. They're both usually play well come MAC tourney time. Next conference is the Missouri Valley. We kind of already talked a lot about that. It's pretty much Wichita or Illinois states to lose. You never know over there at Arch Madness, but I would be shocked if either one of those teams didn't win it. Then we have the Northeast. That is pretty much run by Mount St. Mary's and LIU Brooklyn. I know you watched LIU Brooklyn once or twice or had interest in them for some other financial reasons, but
Yes, financial reasons, and I have some relatives that actually went to that school, so I've watched them closely. They're actually pretty decent. I mean, for Northeast Conference standards, but you're right, it's going to be them or Mount St. Mary's coming out of there.
yeah, those are the top two teams. They actually just played tonight, and LIU beat Mount St. Mary's. But always watch out for my favorite school, Bobby Moe, Robert Morris. I don't think they're any good this year, but I just love saying Bobby Moe. The next conference is the Ohio Valley. Belmont had one conference loss this year. They have one of the probably more underrated big men, if you want to call him a big man, Evan Brads. He's real efficient down low. They should win that, but you never know. That conference, Murray State comes to play, usually Morehead State. I believe Tennessee Tech or Tennessee State, I'm sorry, is solid this year. So that'll be interesting. And the last
Right.
one that starts this week is the Patriot, my hometown conference with Lehigh and Lafayette, and it's Bucknell's to lose. But watch out for Lehigh. They have a big Tim Kempton that's a senior and has been there and is pretty good. So we'll see if Lehigh can do it. But they all those games are played at the higher seed. So usually the higher seed holds serve. Last year it was Wild and the 8 seed Holy Cross somehow won. Never seen anything like that before, but I think Bucknell is probably the best team in the Patriot this year, so they should win that.
Do you know what the big gift for an 8 seed in the Patriot League is if they win the tournament?
I don't
You don't know?
know.
They get a 16 seed and get to get ran out the gym by Oregon.
Yeah, that'll happen, or you get a 15 seed and beat Duke. So,
Touche.
all right. So this week, and there's two big games we wanted to talk about real quick, and two bubble games, I guess you want to call them, that we want to talk about real quick. John, you want to talk about the two, or at least mention the two big ones real quick?
Sure. So we can keep this brief, but game day is going out west for UCLA at Arizona. Just a really monster game. Both teams are actually playing as we speak now, so hopefully each one holds serve, and this game stays as super important. It's an opportunity for Arizona to put more separation and get the 1 seed in Vegas for the Pac-12 tourney. But if you recall, Zona really put the hurting on UCLA early in the year and really got their presence known. So that's going to be a big rematch game in the Pac-12, and it's going to be important, like all these games are down the stretch, jockeying for position, fighting for a 2 seed right now. But to get a 2 seed out in the West is big because I believe the regional final was played in Santa Clara, perhaps, but it's somewhere in California, which would be big for UCLA. So super exciting game there. As that should just be a really rocking atmosphere for game day.
Yeah, and the other big one is Florida at Kentucky. Florida handled Kentucky last time they played, and so a big one for seeding. I think the loser of this game probably can count out like a 3 seed. I don't think they can get anything higher than a 4, I would think. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one to see if Kentucky can get some payback. They're playing at home. Florida's looked real good all year, so we'll see. But yeah, definitely a big one because I don't think that they're gonna give two SEC schools a top 3 seed.
Right. Both of these schools had 3 seeds when the committee um, revealed their bracket last week. So you're kind of right. If this would be a big win and kind of the final opportunity for each one of these teams to get a statement win. So it'll be really interesting. And Florida has just been rolling lately, even through some injuries. That should be a really, really good one.
Yeah, and then the two quick bubble games, if you will. The first one is VCU at Rhode Island. More of a huge game for Rhode Island. VCU, they should get in, but Rhode Island's just kind of been hanging around. This win isn't going to put them in the field, in my opinion, but say they get this win, head into the A10 tournament, win a couple, maybe along the line, get VCU or Dayton again. Now we're maybe talking where they can the A10 can kind of get that third team possibly. So it's interesting for Rhode Island. VCU can't tank down the stretch here, but definitely a huge game for Rhode Island.
Yeah, it's a big one, and Rhode Island is really hanging their whole hat on the November 19th victory when they took down Cincinnati. So that's going to
Yep,
be a really
yep.
big bargaining chip when you're talking about teams that are on the bubble. But you're right. Rhode Island right now is 10-5 in the A10. They're hanging around there. They've taken a couple tough ones, but this would be a really nice piece to add to their resume. I was actually up in at LaSalle because Rhode Island played at LaSalle earlier this week to see what all the buzz was about with this team that was ranked. Rhode Island was ranked in the preseason top 25, so there's a lot of expectations around this team, and they really haven't lived up to it, which is a shame. But I was
Yeah,
out
yeah,
there.
they were probably one of the more disappointing teams this season.
Yeah, yeah. So Jared Terrell just he put on an absolute clinic. He had like 16 at halftime, and Rhode Island really separated against LaSalle, which was good to see. But maybe the best part of the experience was that game was on CBS, and what do you know it? But John Rothstein was actually in the building. So if you're a college basketball fan, you know John Rothstein as a talking head on CBS Sports. If you don't really know college basketball, you probably know him for his annoying tweets, which Aldo, you probably have a nice opinion on.
Yeah, he just needs some new material. Everything is as tough as a weekend in your in-laws and as good as the movie the Godfather trilogy, and I can go on for days, but
Yeah,
he just needs to find a couple new tweets.
those tweets are like a Fortune 500 company. They really run themselves. Um, but so I'm sitting up in the cheap seats at Tom Gola Arena watching this game, and I see I see John Rothstein, and I'm like, you know what? Host on a Shoot Your Shot podcast, you got to shoot your shot. I couldn't just not say anything to him. So there's about 4 minutes left in the game. It's becoming obvious that Rhode Island's going to win, so everyone's loosening up a little bit. So I go and I walk down to press row, and I go up to him, and I'm like, "Yo, Rothstein, what's up?" And he looks up. He has no idea who I am, even though I've seen him probably 7 or 8 times at all these games across the East Coast and said hi to him every single time. But I'm like, hey, Rossi, what's up? And he's a nice guy. He gives me a handshake. He's like, hey, how's it going, man? Ask him if he wanted to come on this pod, which would have been like so overly aggressive. But we made eye contact and I could tell he wanted no part of me. So what I did, and this was a 6 o'clock CBS game. So what I did is I said, yo, where are you watching the late games? We should watch. Because Kentucky was playing. So I invited him to I don't know, go to a bar or watch something. And he promptly looked at me and just said, oh, I got to get back to New York. And then, put his head back in his phone. So I can gladly say that I shot my shot with John Rothstein and he declined my offer to watch college basketball. So that's all I got to say about
that. I guess I'm sorry, but you probably would have had the whole conversation that you guys would have had down already. You could have just went on his Twitter and it would have been the same conversation.
But to hear it from him would have been so cool.
Yeah, it would have. All right. One last game that we a huge bubble game in my opinion, might be one of the first kind of lose and you're out game, especially in the Big East, is Marquette at Providence. Kind of teams that are trending in the two different directions. Marquette had that huge win at Nova and was kind of safely in the field, and now they just decided they don't want to play in March Madness, and they're losing left and right. And Providence, nobody probably realizes they have a decent resume and might sneak in, but they really do. I think Ed Cooley actually has done one of the best coaching jobs in the country after losing Chris Dunn and Ben Bentel. But they've won 3 in a row now: Butler, Xavier, and Creighton. So yeah, they're kind of hovering around the bubble a little bit. So I think both of those teams definitely aren't getting in. So I just think that this one's kind of lose, and you're got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I would agree. Providence has really been flying under the radar here and playing well. So they both have 3 games left. Providence plays Marquette, then DePaul and St. John. So this is it for Providence. This is the last chance for them to get a decent win. Marquette actually has a tough ending stretch with Xavier and Creighton, so they have a little bit of opportunity down the stretch. But you're right. This is a big game, as not only are they fighting to get into the tournament, the conference, the NCAA tournament, but this is just for standing in the Big East. And you're right. If you can get kind of a leg up on your own competition, that would be big. So yeah, a kind of sneaky semi-elimination game here.
Yeah. All right. John mentioned earlier that we're taping this on Thursday night, so I'm going to come back and post it on our usual Friday night and give everybody our picks. John will text me his picks since he won't be available, and I will get them to everyone because, we got to keep it going because I'm hot. So we're keeping it going no matter who's here and who's not here. But since you're not going to be here tomorrow when I'm recording the picks, John, what's your let it fly for this week?
So my let it fly for this week is laundromats. Okay, these things.
Oh,
No, see, look, these things are amazing. I live in a building with 5 units. We have 1 washer, 1 dryer, coin operated. The dryer is awful. If you're going to do laundry, you have to block out your entire Saturday. So I invested in a big old laundry bag, put all my laundry in this bag, went down to a laundromat where they have this huge industrial washers and dryers that can hold 8 loads. And it was a thing of beauty. You just load these things up. They run for half an hour. You're in, you're out. It's super great. I know people are anti-laundromat, but equipment, you can get it all done at once. And then you can just go around the corner and have a beer while you're waiting for your laundry. So very pro laundromat. And if I ever invest in a washer dryer, I want it to be the big industrial ones.
That is definitely what the people wanted to hear.
You know what? You gotta speak from the heart.
Okay, I think we're good.
So you're gonna hit me with the picks.
Yeah, so I'll just come. I'll just tomorrow. It's tomorrow. I'll be all right. So my picks are these. These are John's picks, and then I'll do my let it fly and sign off, kind of.
Cool. Okay. No, sounds good. I thought that was good. We definitely focus less on the actual games and more on the conversations. That was cool.
Yeah, no, I thought it was good. All right. Oh, jeez.
I haven't been watching. Have you been watching these late games?
I was watching Arizona, and they kind of just went off. I didn't see UCLA, but when I did see them, they're only up like 5, so I'm assuming they didn't cover.
Oh boy. Okay, so USC is down 10 right now. I took
Yeah.
and